Welcome everyone, and thank you for your interest in the AmeriCorps VISTA program. Today we're going to be conducting the Iowa AmeriCorps VISTA Request for Concept Paper Technical Assistance webinar. My name is Jancy LaFollette and I'm from the CNCS State Office. I'll be your presenter and facilitator today. Today's presentation is being recorded. If you object, you may disconnect at any time. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. All lines are currently open, so please place us on mute so we don't hear any background noise, typing, or sidebar conversations. If you are on the phone and you did not join us via Skype, you can mute and unmute your line via *6. So if you don't have a mute button, *6 will mute and unmute your phone line. If you have joined us via Skype, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there should be a blue radial button that looks like a microphone. If you click on that, that will mute and unmute your line. Again, all the lines are open today as we will have time for questions throughout. Please do not place us on hold during the call. We will likely hear your hold music in the background. While I'm sure it's beautiful, it can be distracting as we move through the presentation. We will have time, again, as I said, throughout the presentations for questions. However, feel free to use the chat function on the Skype system to ask questions throughout the presentation, and I will be monitoring that throughout. So our agenda for today is we will be focusing on the aspects of the AmeriCorps VISTA concept paper and the request for concept paper process for sponsorship for 2018. The concept paper is phase 1 of the VISTA application process. Our agenda today is to do an overview of CNCS and the AmeriCorps VISTA program in order to introduce you to the program. We'll look at the Iowa VISTA request for concept paper, and then we'll do an overview of the request for concept paper timeline. If you haven't already, please familiarize yourself with the RFCP, or the request for concept paper, paying special attention to the links to the program guide for project sponsors and the link to the concept paper instructions. Both of those can be found on page 1 and the last page of the RFCP. I will be pointing out parts and particular pages of the RFCP throughout today's presentation, so it might be a good practice to print off a copy of that document to take notes on. And that's just a suggestion as we move through today. Our technical assistance calls will highlight areas of the RFCP, but it's not intended to be an all-encompassing webinar today, as we only have about an hour. So please make sure you read the documentation in full, along with the concept paper instructions and the guidance for project sponsors. There's also an online tutorial, VISTA 101, Understanding VISTA, can also be a helpful tool to learn more about the VISTA program. So I just wanted to point out that those resources are available to you. If you guys do have questions after today's presentation, I will be sending out the recording to anyone who is on our distribution list, but you can most certainly feel free to contact our office as well if you'd like to request a copy, or if you would like to set up a technical assistance call, we can set up some times to discuss your ideas for a VISTA project if you are interested. The Corporation for National and Community Service, or referred to as CNCS, is who we are. So I wanted to begin with just a brief overview of the corporation. And since we are the federal agency that oversees the AmeriCorps VISTA programming, we wanted to make sure that folks knew who we were. So our mission is to improve lives, strengthen communities, and foster civic engagement through service and volunteering. We not only oversee AmeriCorps VISTA, we also oversee the Senior Corps programs in Iowa, which include RSVP, foster grandparents, and senior companions. CNCS is an independent federal agency whose mission is listed on the screen. If you guys have any questions about this, again, please let us know. Our CNCS family consists of the Volunteer Generation Fund, the Senior Corps programs, as well as our 3 AmeriCorps programs. I'm going to briefly do an overview of these, and I apologize for going through them quickly, but I just wanted to make sure that folks are aware of kind of our national service network, and that's not really today's focus, but I wanted to do a quick overview. So Volunteer Generation Fund is a program that supports voluntary organizations and state service commissions in boosting the impact of volunteers to address community needs. There are funds available through the Iowa Commission on Volunteer Service, so if you guys are interested in learning more, I would definitely reach out to them. Our Senior Corps programs are a network of our 55 and older members. They consist of foster grandparents, senior companions, and RSVP. Foster grandparents are seniors who serve children Senior companions are seniors who serve other seniors, so an independent living program. And then our RSVP program is more of our traditional one-stop shop for volunteers who are 55 and over, and they do a broad breadth of different volunteer opportunities in their communities. In addition, our AmeriCorps programs consist of the AmeriCorps NCCC, or the National Civilian Community Corps, which is our full-time residential program for men and women 18 to 24 years of age. We also have our AmeriCorps state and national programs. State programs are overseen through our Iowa Commission on Volunteer Service, and those are grants that are given to nonprofits in our area, and they support a broad range of local service programs that engage Americans in direct service to meet critical community needs. And finally, our AmeriCorps VISTA program. That's the program that we will focus on today. VISTA provides full-time members to community organizations and public agencies to create and expand programs that build capacity and ultimately bring low-income individuals out of poverty. So this is just a very quick snapshot of the National Service family, and we just wanted to make sure that folks kind of understood kind of who's in the family that we work with. We're going to dive a little deeper into the AmeriCorps VISTA program and go over a few of the aspects of VISTA, just so folks understand how VISTA is a little different from our other AmeriCorps programs and Senior Corps programs, if you guys have had some experience with them. So AmeriCorps VISTA is our only AmeriCorps program that focuses exclusively on fighting poverty. VISTAs provide full-time members to community-based organizations and public agencies, rather than providing a cash grant, the VISTA program places VISTA members with sponsoring organization and provides a living allowance and other benefits for that member. So it is a unique grant situation as we look at when you think of traditional grants. The sponsoring organization does absorb the costs related to project supervision and logistical support. While the VISTA is a unique grant, it still is a federal resource and investment by the sponsoring organization and the community. Each year, more than 8,000 AmeriCorps VISTA members leverage human, financial, and material resources across the country. In Iowa alone, we have about 75 VISTA members who serve in 13 currently active AmeriCorps sponsors. The VISTA mission is to increase the capacity of low-income people to improve the conditions of their own lives. To achieve the program's purpose, VISTA operates under our core competencies or core principles, which include an anti-poverty focus, community empowerment, which is basically making sure that the project engages residents of the low-income community, sustainable solutions, so VISTAs are short-term resources that build long-term anti-poverty programs, and VISTAs typically the goal is to be phased out. So the VISTA member itself is to phase out, to work themselves out of a job. And then finally, to build capacity. Our VISTA members do not provide direct service. Rather, they increase the capacity of the organization to fight poverty through such activities as fundraising, establishing a community volunteer recruitment and management systems, community outreach, collaboration development, and so on. So when you're looking at a VISTA program, you're really looking to begin with the end in mind and ask yourself, how will my VISTA program eliminate poverty? So really that's what our programs focus on, and that's how our AmeriCorps VISTA grants are set up to look for kind of how we're building sustainability in our communities. Page 2 of the request for concept paper really talks about the program description. So if you have any questions, as I am kind of going through this quickly, I just wanted to make sure that folks were aware that that is described in the request for concept paper. VISTA supports locally driven solutions, as I said, and the program is designed to generate commitment from private sector resources, encourage volunteer service at the local level, and support efforts by our local agencies and community organizations to achieve long-term sustainability. Activities or programs created, we look for sustainability by the end of 3-year grant period. So each of our grants are 3-year with an annual renewal. And so an annual continuation. And then after 3 years, you have to go through a renewal process. I'm sorry, I need to get the right terminology there for all of you. The primary role, again, is to build capacity. And our VISTAs look at capacity building as VISTA looks at capacity building as a set of activities that expand the scale, reach, efficiency, or effectiveness of programs and organizations. Capacity building allows an organization and the community to sustain the VISTA's project activities once the project has ended. So I just wanted to make sure that folks understood kind of what we consider capacity building. Full guidance is available through, again, the request for concept paper for programs. There is additional guidance out there for you. Our VISTA sponsors, so who is eligible to apply? Sponsors are not limited to those 501c3 status. They may also include nonprofits with an IRS designation of any 501c status that focus on anti-poverty. Nonprofits, public organizations such as state and local governments, and Native American tribes are available to apply for sponsorship. Organizations that focus solely on advocacy or lobbying are not eligible. A sponsor is the legal recipient of the federal grant who is responsible for the oversight of the VISTA program to ensure compliance with federal regulations. The sponsor is the entity that develops the concept paper for the VISTA program and then sees that the VISTA program sees it through its completion. So a sponsor must be able to excuse me, I need to go to the next slide in order to continue that. A sponsor must be able to provide direct support to the project, recruit and supervise the VISTA members, provide the necessary administrative support to complete the project's goals, meet the program reporting requirements to CNCS, comply with provisions of the DVSA or the Domestic Volunteer Service Act, and any of our published regulations or guidelines, and really develop and manage the project in a meaningful way that low-income communities will be served. So VISTA, more specifically, our sponsors, so you would provide the supervision and support. You develop a VISTA assignment description. You provide professional opportunities, professional development opportunities, on-site orientation and training, transportation and mileage reimbursement if needed to do the VAD, the volunteer assignment description, and then obviously compliance with prohibited activities. So that is kind of what the sponsor does in a nutshell, just basic oversight. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the VISTA member itself. Again, page 3 and 4 of the request for concept paper talks about what a VISTA member is and how that VISTA member can be used. So members range in age and they hail from a diverse range of backgrounds. They commit for a full-time 1-year national service term of service. They help solve community problems, specifically fighting poverty, and they must be at least 18 years of age or older. There is no upper age limit for our VISTA program. And they must be a U.S. citizen or lawful legal permanent resident. Typically, our members do have college degrees or at least 3 years of work experience. All of our members do have to have a high school diploma or a GED to be in the program. Sometimes they're local community members and sometimes they're national recruits. And we find most of our members want to make a difference in their community and have a dedication to service. So that's really why they found the VISTA program. Just a quick overview again. Our members do go through a background check, so we do provide background checks for members at no cost to our program. That is something that VISTA does support. In addition, our members do have a range of benefits that they receive, such as a living allowance, health benefits, moving and relocation if they're eligible, child care if they're eligible. We do provide some pre-service orientation as well as professional development training throughout their course of their service term. And we also do provide an end-of-service benefit for our members. That end-of-service benefit for the members can be either an education award or an a cash stipend at the end. So it really just depends on what the member is interested in. The program is designed to be a win-win-win situation for the organization, the member, and the community. So we do want our members to have a great experience. We want our sponsoring organizations to have a wonderful experience. And then we also want the community to be able to thrive and grow from the experience. So that's really what we look at when we look at our VISTA programs. I know I covered a lot about CNCS and our National Service Family and kind of what is VISTA in our first 15 minutes. So I know I just threw a lot of information out to you. The request for concept paper does have additional information available, as well as there's tons of links out there. However, are there any questions at this time about CNCS, our National Service Family, or kind of what the AmeriCorps VISTA program is? I'll pause for questions. You can provide those in the conversation box, or the phone lines are open, so if you wanted to mute your line, I would take questions on the line as well. I see there is a question. So Constance asked a question, if you are interested in direct service by AmeriCorps members, is there a request for concept paper for those members as well? So the direct service members are the AmeriCorps state programs. That program is overseen by the Iowa Commission on Volunteer Service, and they have their own requests for proposals available. That is not done through our office. That's actually done directly through ICVS, Iowa Commission on Volunteer Service. If you actually go to www.volunteeriowa.org, you will be able to find more information. So volunteeriowa.org will get you to their website, and it provides a lot of information about the commission itself. But if you look for the AmeriCorps program, it will provide you additional information about their application process. That is the program that would be able to provide the direct service that you're seeking. Great question. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. I'm going to talk about the VISTA sponsor application process. So the VISTA application process is actually 2 steps. Our first step being the concept paper, and our second step being a full project application. Currently, right now, we are in step 1, which is the concept paper. The concept paper is a tool that we use to evaluate whether an organization would be an appropriate VISTA sponsor or not. So we're not at this point really diving into kind of what your work plans will look like and what your performance measurements will be. We're really just assessing whether this organization and this concept that you're bringing to us would be a good and appropriate VISTA project, and you guys would serve as a good sponsor to oversee the program. The concept paper itself is currently open. It is a paper, what we call a paper application. eGrants is our online reporting system that was scheduled to go through some updates this October. However, those have been delayed. But our NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability, has not technically been opened in our eGrant system yet. So we are doing a paper application process at this time. Eventually, our programs will need to move into the eGrant system, but for right now, we're just doing the paper application. The application is due on November 3rd, and that will be via email to ia@cns.gov. We'll go through all of this in more detail. The second step of this is the project application. Once the concept paper is approved, a full application for federal assistance is submitted to determine if a VISTA program is to be awarded. The full application really goes into much more detail than the concept paper. That's where you establish VISTA assignment descriptions. That's where you establish work plans and project goals. There's a lot more detail into that and getting down into more of the nitty-gritty pieces. The way our process works is that we do the concept paper first. That's through a review committee. The review committee then determines who's to be invited to a full application. So concept papers are due on November 3rd. By November 17th, we will notify those folks who submit a concept paper if they've been asked to submit the full application for federal assistance to move forward, or if we have any clarifying information or questions at that time. Submissions of the concept paper do not guarantee approval or commitment of VISTA resources. Each submission is evaluated on its own merits and is subject to the availability of resources. Upon approval, the concept paper applications will be invited to submit a full application through the e-grant system. So once we actually get through the paper process, we will then move into the e-grant system. So I just wanted to make sure that folks understood that there are 2 steps to this application process. The Iowa VISTA 2018 application or request for concept paper. On page 5 of the request for concept paper, we outline some of the specifics that we'll talk about here and really what we look for in Iowa. If you've worked with VISTA in other states, each state sets some different criteria for focus areas and kind of the minimum number, those types of things. So everyone's a little different. So these are Iowa specific details for our application. So in Iowa, we are seeking applications with a minimum of 4 full-time members. Any more, you can apply for more than that, or less than that, we would need to have a sidebar conversation if that's a good fit for a sponsorship. But we are looking for those with a minimum of 4. So you can apply for more or less, but that's really what we're looking for. We are seeking projects with the following focus areas. So that's economic opportunity, education, healthy futures, or veterans and military families. So under economic opportunity, that consists of financial literacy, employment or housing issues. Education really looks at school readiness, success in schools, post-secondary success, or STEM. And then healthy futures, we're looking at obesity and food, access to health care, hunger, or the focus on opioid and prescription drug addiction. So the 2 other bullet points are really serving rural communities. So we really try to look at programs that serve not only our metro areas, but also our rural communities. And then the focus on opioid and prescription drug addiction, which really falls under healthy futures, is a main focus right now for CNCS as a whole, as well as our VISTA program. And so Iowa is looking for programs that can focus on that as well. We also look for sponsors who can contribute towards our cost share. Cost share is our fancy term for match. And so what that means is that there are some funding that is being provided, cash funding that is being provided by the sponsoring organization. Approximately $12,500 for the living allowance, or it's consistent of a living allowance of 1 member. So the living allowance right now is $12,311. So I always round up for the cost share just to round up. And so what happens with cost share is we look at programs that can support the living allowance of at least one of those members. And we'll go into a little bit greater detail about what cost sharing is, but these are just kind of the criteria that we're looking for the Iowa VISTA applications in 2018. The next slide, we talk about the criteria to consider. So when choosing which applications to support, VISTA evaluates prospective and current VISTA projects and sponsors on their ability to manage and effectively apply VISTA resources to build long-term sustainable solutions. So after 3 years of sponsorship, our VISTA programs do need to go back through a renewal process or the request for concept paper. So we do have a few folks on the phone today who are going through a renewal process or considering going through a renewal process. These criteria can be found on page 4 through 5 of the request for concept paper. And those criteria are really what we look at is if the application reflects the VISTA poverty mission, it addresses one or more of our strategic focus areas, which again are that economic opportunity, healthy futures, education, or veterans and military families. And then address our VISTA core principles, which again, those principles are the anti-poverty focus, capacity building, community empowerment, and sustainable solutions. We want our sponsors to demonstrate an understanding of national service in context of the VISTA programming. So every program is a little different, and we want to make sure that our applications really are VISTA-specific activities that they're looking for the VISTA members to do. Criteria to consider is if you can articulate and clearly define the goals with measurable impact. So what are the members going to be doing and how are we measuring that success? And then clearly state the application's commitment towards the project success. So making sure that there's space, making sure that there's resources available to that member, some of that in kind as we look at it, available to make sure that the application is a success. Any questions yet so far? So our next slide talks about cost sharing. So on page 5 of the request for concept paper provides a little bit more detail. But for cost share, the VISTA regulations do not require a non-federal match. However, in order to maximize federal resources, CNCS does look to VISTA sponsors to help pay the living allowance of some of our project's members. The CNCS office is seeking programs who have a minimum, as I said earlier, of 4 VISTA members who would cost share one member's living allowance, or approximately $12,500. The way this works is the living allowance is paid to each member directly through CNCS, so you as a sponsor wouldn't actually be paying the member that money. And then the member would be coded, one member would be coded as your cost share member. They're paid the same as everybody else, but the sponsor then is billed on a bi-weekly basis for the cost share members' days that they've served. And so it's not upfront that you have to pay the amount, so there's no down payment on that. You're actually billed on a bi-weekly basis. From this, what you get is really the full-time member to work on your anti-poverty solutions. The member also receives the education award or the post-service stipend, so that end-of-service benefit that's not coming out of the cost share amount. Payroll services are provided by us, so there's no payroll services that you have to set up. Again, members are paid directly through CNCS and the U.S. Treasury. We do also provide a pre-service orientation, the relocation assistance, child care assistance, and then we do have our recruitment website, or our My AmeriCorps portal, that we use for recruitment for our programs. Again, that is part of the grant process. So that's it's a pretty basic process for cost share, but a lot of people are, it's a little confusing because we don't use the match terminology and we talk about the living allowance of one member, and so projects sometimes think they have to pay the members directly, and they don't. This is really just a billing process and a match process for the grant. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. It's a little different than most grants you might have worked with in the past for matching opportunities. So just wanted to make sure that folks understood that. Are there any questions regarding cost share? And the lines are open. Again, if you've muted your line through *6, you can unmute your line through *6.
Hey, Jancy, this is Nick from LSI. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Nick, yes.
Hey, can you talk a little bit about just the cost share and how it relates to the numbers of members? Is that the cost share per 4 members, and how does it change if members are greater?
Yes, that's a great question, Nick. So yes, so the cost share, the $12,500, is for 4 members. So for four members, one of those would be coded as our cost share member, and so for 4 members, that's the $12,500. So basically, you get 4 members, 3 for free and 1 for $12,500. If you want to, if I was a salesman. And so that's how that works. If you increase that number, so let's say you have 8 members. So instead of 4, you have 8. So you double your amount. So therefore, we would double the cost share amount. So that means 8 members, and 2 of those members would be cost shared. So that's kind of how we look at that. Now, if you apply for, let's say, 5 members, then we would have a conversation about what the cost share would look like. For our programs who are new, that might be a little different than programs who have been with us for a longer period of time. So typically it's for 4 members, and that's one cost share. We have a conversation about the cost sharing for anything between 4 to 8, and then at the 8 mark, the the cost sharing amount goes up to the 2 cost share, so $25,000 for that. So does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. We also have a question on the conversation. So if you have more than 4 members, do you cost share more than one? So yes, I hopefully, Constance, that answered that question. So Nick's question answered that, I'm hoping. So if you do, from 4 to 8 is when we would double that, and then between 4 to 8 we would have a conversation about what's appropriate there. But typically we don't double the cost share until it gets up to 8. So hopefully that helps. Constance, let me know if that didn't answer your question. And then Chris asked, on the point scale for application review, if we cost share more than a minimum, do we get more points? You know, Chris, we can look at that. Yes. Not we've never really had anyone who had 4 members and wanted to cost share 2 of them, but we do look at that, because what that does is that actually frees up resources for us to be able to provide more programming, and so we try to look at how we can balance that. So we really, in this application process right now, for the concept paper, what we're looking at is just if the sponsor can provide the oversight that's needed, and if what they're asking the members to be working on are appropriate VISTA service activities. So really right now, that's what we're focused on. And with the cost sharing, that comes more when we create the budget and the full application and those pieces. But these are pieces that you should be thinking of now. So there are points, I guess you could say, for the more cost share you have. You do get a few more points for that. But that doesn't tip the scale in regards to you can or cannot get resources because of that. Because it is not, as I said, it's not a federal requirement. It's just one of those things that we look at to see how we can distribute our funds more appropriately across all of the programs that need them. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Any other questions? These are great questions. Thank you, everyone. So the concept paper, we're going to dive into that a little bit more and kind of break it down a little bit here in our last 30 minutes. So the link to the concept paper instructions can be found in the request for concept paper on page 4 and 7. However, the actual concept paper template, that template that has been sent out, does include what each section should include. So you're going to find dual information on those things. So I just wanted to make sure that folks were aware of that. When we went to the paper application process, we tried to carry over as much information that you could kind of click on in eGrants to be able to put that in the paper, the actual paper template itself. So I apologize if there's any confusion on that. The concept paper instructions, again, there's links in the request for concept paper. The template outlines the details that you need as well. There are full instructions available, again, on our nationalservice.gov website, so there's a link directly there. The concept papers are submitted via paper, and the template is available. Concept paper consists of the following components. So first is the legal applicant information. Next is the application information. The narrative is your biggest chunk that you have. That's really where we get a lot of your detail at. And then obviously you want to review and then your authorize and submit sections. And so those are the sections that we're actually going to break down piece by piece here to make sure folks understand them. So we're first going to start with the legal applicant information. So this is just basic information about you, the sponsor or the applicant. If you are working with numerous community partners, so let's say you're an organization that's collaborating with a few other organizations in your community to focus on one area. One person needs to be the legal applicant for that. So I'm going to use, we have some programs here in Des Moines. It's a cohort of churches who are coming together to focus on one focus area. And so there's one legal applicant. One of those churches is chosen to be the legal applicant. And so they are the ones who are submitting this application, and they're the ones who are legally responsible for the oversight of the program. Page 6 through 7 of the concept paper instructions kind of talks about this a little bit more in detail. But here's where you're going to put your legal name, your address. You do have to have an EIN and a DUNS number in order to be able to put information into eGrants. So this is something that we ask for in the paper application. So make sure that that information is available to you. Project title. So this is going to be the name of the VISTA project. In eGrants, it automatically defaults to your legal name, but here's where you can come up with a catchy title for your VISTA project to be able to really focus on what that program is going to focus on. And then the project director or the contact for this project. So project director is the person who is the named staff who will be overseeing the VISTA project. This does have to be a staff person. It cannot be a volunteer. So the project director must be a staff person of your organization. Next, in the application, or the concept paper, I'm sorry, is the application information. This can be found on page 7 of the instructions, the concept paper instructions. The time span, that question is the estimated time that the project will take. As I said earlier, most of our grants are 3 years in length, with an annual continuation application every year. So most projects put a time span of 3 years. So they're looking for resources for the 3 years of the grant. Every once in a while, we have someone who's just wanting VISTA members for 1 year, and so they put that in there. But typical time span length here is 3. The area to be served by the project, this is the geographic area anticipated to be served. So the service area, so this could be multiple cities or one city, towns, or counties, depending on how you're really looking at that geographic area. So the reason we ask for this is to really see where our members are serving, to be able to say on the map to highlight those areas. Next is our focus area. So that's where you're going to select economic opportunity or healthy futures or veterans and military families or education. So this is really the focus area of the VISTA project. Sometimes there's more than one. So sometimes you're focusing on economic opportunity and education, or you're focusing on healthy futures and veterans and military families. So you can choose more than one. I don't encourage you to go over 2. This really is to hone you in to focus on the project and what the project will be impacting. So you can have more than one, but I don't recommend over 2 on that particular focus area. Next is the target population, or the beneficiary population that your project intends to bring out of poverty. And this really is a list. So this is a checklist of people that you can, or kind of a demographic, a beneficiary population that you're going to be focusing on serving. And so that's really who is the intended recipient of these services being provided. And then finally, other CNCS resources received. So if you, as the legal applicant, have received other resources from the Corporation for National and Community Service, such as AmeriCorps State and National Programming, Senior Corps, Volunteer Generation Fund, this is the place where you would describe those other resources that you have received from CNCS. So it's pretty basic information in the legal applicant and the application information at this point in the concept paper. The narrative, as I said earlier, is kind of the meat of what we're going to be reviewing here. Page 8 through 10 of the concept paper instructions do outline, and as well as the concept paper template, do outline what should be included in each narrative. Our narratives should be descriptive, but also concise. So I know that's kind of contradicting myself there a little bit, but you do want to be descriptive and concise as possible. There is no limit in the concept paper field for text, or there's not a limit there, but just make sure that you're being as concise as possible. These are the sections as how the review panel will determine if VISTA service activities are appropriate, and if your organization has the capacity to support VISTA programs, and then how the program will look to build capacity and ultimately sustainability of the program. So this is really, as I said, what we're looking at. The first narrative is the need, and so this is really where you're describing what the unmet poverty-related need is in your communities that you're going to be serving, and what the VISTA resources will be addressing. So in the needs section, we encourage you to use data points that are current, not from 1985, but current data points. The last 10 or less years is the better. This is really where you want to be specific in the need you plan to address in the community. Make sure you cite your data points and your data sources. So don't make a comment and say, we need VISTA members because we have poverty in our area. Well, why do you have poverty? What data points point to that? So that's really what we're looking for. Include the planned program strategy or the intervention that you're going to be providing. So that's the service activities that those members are going to be doing that will lead to the final outcomes of the community being served. So really the need is describing why you need VISTA resources and what is the unmet need that is currently happening. Next is the strengthening community section. This is where you're going to describe how VISTA resources will complement or expand current efforts in the community to address the need that you just described. And so this is where you're going to include how many VISTAs you're going to be utilizing. You will be including how the VISTA members will be used, so what will they be doing. And this is where you're going to include how the project will be designed to build long-term sustainability and how the approach might change over time. So we understand that VISTA and VISTA programs really are living, like you're living in the moment. Things happen, things shift. We have a great idea and this is what we want to do. However, oh my gosh, this just happened. And so things shift, and really how that design might change from year 1 to year 3, or if we get this put into place. So let's say our idea is to build a volunteer recruitment strategy. We get everything put into place in year 1. Well, year 2 and 3, we shouldn't be recreating, tools and templates and things like that. So really, how would that program change over time? The third narrative is the organizational capacity, and this is where you're going to really detail your organization's capacity to manage the VISTA resources. So this is, again, for the legal applicant, so the person going to be overseeing the VISTA program. You're going to explain your organization's experience operating an anti-poverty program in the identified focus areas you have selected, and provide past examples of your work. You're going to describe community partners that will engage in this effort. So if you are a cohort or a collaboration, what will their roles be? How will they be providing insight into this? If you're a standalone organization who's requesting just to focus on housing in your community, what other community organizations will be partnering to make sure that this is a success? You're going to describe how you will manage the project, include how you're going to recruit and supervise those members. We want to make sure that there's some plans or some thought processes in place as how those members will be overseen, and what steps will be taken to make sure that they are recruited and supervised appropriately. In addition, you're going to include information on how other staff or volunteers will be involved in the project. So if there's other staff in your organization that will help with recruitment and outreach, or that will, you might be the program director, but there might be you have 4 members who are serving in 4 different departments, and you're going to have site supervisors under, there's going to be 4 different site supervisors or 3 other site supervisors. You're going to want to talk about who those people are, or maybe not who they are, but how they will be involved ideally. Because sometimes we don't know at this point, right? We're developing a concept. So we're like, ideally, we're going to have 3 different departments, and there's going to be 4 members, myself and 3 other people, and we want to focus on these different departments. Some of you are farther along in this concept and this idea, and so you can specifically name those people. So that's kind of that process as well. You're also going to include information as to what resources your agency can provide. So this includes office and desk space. This includes supplies and computers and phones. This is really where you talk about if you're going to be able to provide a cost share for 4 members or 2 cost share for 8 members. And so this is really what other resources the organization will be able to provide to really support and manage the VISTA project. We do look to make sure that our sponsors have appropriate tools. So if we're asking our VISTA members to do research and grant research and grant writing, but we don't provide our VISTA members with any laptops or computer access, that's kind of a big deterrent to be able to be successful as a VISTA member. So we just want to make sure that folks are aware that if we want them to do certain things, we have to make sure that they have the right tools for that. This does not mean that a VISTA member has to have a personal office with a view and a closed door. It just needs to mean that they have to have an appropriate workspace, and so what that means and how you guys describe that. So I just want to make sure that folks are aware that I don't even have a door that closes in my office. So, there you go. Intermediary justification is the final narrative. And so intermediary justification, this is if it's applicable. It does say optional, I think, in the instructions, but this really is if it's applicable. And this is really for our multi-site projects. So we often refer to multi-site projects as intermediary sponsors. And those are organizations that help provide the resources to other entities. So if you're, again, as I said, my example earlier was a cohort of churches. If you're a cohort of churches and one person is the legal entity, you're going to put in here an intermediary justification because you're going to oversee that project, but you're also working with 3 other organizations outside of your organization. And so this is where you're going to explain how you're going to administer services, provide technical support, how you're going to provide training to those site supervisors and to those members, and really oversee those other sites that are involved in this VISTA project. Basically, if you are proposing members serve at an organization that is not your organization, you will need to fill out this section. So anybody who has members serving at someone that is not your organization, then you will want to make sure that you fill out this section. You're going to include current, objective, again, and local data stats that demonstrate the need in each of the proposed geographic areas. So if you're serving multiple cities or if you're serving multiple counties, so if you're a big multi-site project that's serving a larger geographic area, you're going to want to make sure that you demonstrate why there's a need not only in where you sit, but also where these other organizations sit. You're going to identify the proposed service site partners if they have been identified. Sometimes they haven't been identified at this particular juncture, but we want to make sure that folks are looking at that, as they will need to be identified in the full application process. If you have not identified them, then you're going to want to describe how you will identify them and how you'll move forward to identify who those other project sponsors or those sites will be. You're going to include information on how you're going to monitor the sites and provide technical assistance. And you'll also focus, and if you focus on if the application has different focus areas, let me rephrase how I say that. If the application has different focus areas, how you will capture the data points for each of those different areas. So if you're working on education and economic opportunity, so you want to make sure that you're going to capture that information. And then if those sites will be contributing to the cost share. Sometimes multi-site projects actually divide that cost share amount up amongst their different sites. And so kind of how you're going to be doing that. So the narrative is the biggest chunk of the concept paper, and this is really the pieces that will inform our decision to move forward. Again, if there's anything that needs to be clarified, we'll reach back out to you. VISTA is a little unique in that if we have questions, we can ask those questions of you through the application process. It's not a pass or fail. It really is we think this is a good idea, but we need a little bit more information there. So we just want to make sure that folks are aware of that process. Again, as you get through this and you start thinking about things, you're like, not really sure if that would be appropriate or if that would work, feel free to call our office, myself or Vicki Hover-Williamson. She's the state director here in Iowa. We will be able to address those questions with you and kind of work through some ideas if you need to bounce some ideas off of us. The final piece of the concept paper is really a review, authorize, and submit. So really we do encourage you to print off the concept paper and review all the information on it, making sure your EIN number is correct, you didn't transpose any numbers, making sure you've spell checked everything, and that information is accurate. The authorization you will see at the bottom of the concept paper template. There is a place to review and read the assurances and certifications. They're actually linked in that template. Please make sure that you are reviewing those or your authorized representative is reviewing those. The authorized representative is the person who has the authority to commit federal resources to your organization. Sometimes that's the project director, sometimes that's the grant writer, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the executive director. So it's really who the authorized rep who's signing off that your agency is going after this federal funds. So we just want to make sure that that person is named and kind of reviews and signs off on that form. Finally is to submit. And again, as I said, this is a concept paper template, and it is to be emailed to the Iowa State Office at our IA, which is just the abbreviation for Iowa, at cns.gov. So that is an email address that goes for the office, and so that's where it's to be sent to. The subject line is just the Iowa VISTA Concept Paper 2018, and then the name of your organization. So just put in the name of your organization there. These are due on November 3rd at 4 o'clock Central Time, and so that is when the concept papers are due. Page 10 of the RFCP or the concept paper instructions, I'm sorry, about the concept paper instructions does talk about the authorizations pieces as well. So just making sure that folks understand the authorization aspect of it and how to submit. Make sure that you do review. Spell check is your friend, so make sure you utilize that tool. Finally, we're going to discuss in just our last few minutes, we're going to discuss the VISTA timeline. So concept papers are due on November 3rd. Concept papers are reviewed by a review committee, and by November 17th, we will send notices if you're approved and kind of what the next steps are, if we have any questions, if we need any clarification, and then an invitation for the full application for federal assistance. On December 15th, the full application for federal assistance will be due in e-grants, and then the VADs, or VISTA assignment descriptions, will be due via email. So those are kind of due outside of the e-grant system at this point. By January 12th, we will give full notice if the applications are approved, if any changes need to be made, to sign the memorandum of agreement with CNCS, and kind of what the next steps are. So this is just to give you guys a feel of how this process will work. In February, there is a National VISTA Supervisor Orientation that we want our new VISTA supervisors to go to, and so that is scheduled. The dates have not been confirmed yet for that, but that will be in February. And then March and April is when our recruitment and selection of VISTA candidates begins. And then July is really when we look for our VISTA members to start. So this process, while it looks like it's spelled out a little bit, the application process itself is pretty time intensive. So we want to make sure that our potential VISTA sponsors realize that there is some time commitment between November and January to get the applications in, to get questions addressed. It's a pretty fast-paced time frame in order to be successful. There's some variables that come into consideration there, such as the FY18 appropriations. There's a lot of things that kind of play into that time frame, and so we want to make sure that folks are aware that there might be some additional last-minute things or quick turnarounds on things that need to be happening in those. We do also want to note that the full application for federal assistance and the host site locations will need to be named. So if you're in the concept paper process now, and we talked about that, you don't have to necessarily name who the other service sites will be if you're a multi-site project. However, in the full application, you will need to name those. And so keep that in mind as if you're looking to collaborate with other folks, that you might want to start those conversations to see if that's something that they would even be interested in. We sometimes get to the full application and we have sponsors who are like, oh, we haven't even started those conversations yet, so maybe we should do that. I'm like, oh my goodness, yes. So you might want to start that conversation now if you're looking to partner with other organizations. And then finally, VISTA does take time, and I can say this 52 times in 52 different ways, but VISTA is a time commitment. VISTA oversight is a time commitment. There's a lot of moving pieces and parts, especially during recruitment and getting members on board and getting them up and rolling. So not only is the application process time consuming, just like any grant is, but the actual recruitment process of members does take time and ability to be able to oversee that. So that's something that I want projects to think about as they're developing VISTA sponsorship, that this is typically something that is tacked on to someone else's work duties that are already a full-time position. And so we just want to make sure that folks are aware that there is a time commitment that it takes for VISTA programming. It always takes more time than what you really initially figure it will take. So just keep that in mind. I can't really say, it's about this many hours per week. It really depends on the time of year. Application is pretty time intensive. Recruitment is pretty time intensive. But actually, if you're starting off and getting the project set up, from application to actually getting members on board, there's a lot of things that you need to think about between then and the members actually starting. And so you want to make sure that there is someone on your staff who is committed to be able to do that and has the time to focus on that as you're developing these partnerships and developing this concept. So I just want to make sure that folks understand the time commitment for the VISTA project. Any questions yet so far? I'll pause for questions. We have a few minutes left, but any questions about anything we've talked about? For the timeline, the dates are subject to change. I don't think I said that, but it is noted there. So the times are subject to change just based on anything that might happen. But for the most part, that will be the timeline for the VISTA project. Any information, additional information that you might need, the Iowa State office is available to you. We are 2 people, so it is myself and Vicki Hover-Williamson. Our time is limited, but we do always have time for you. So we want to make sure that folks, if you do have questions, please let us know. ia@cns.gov is our office email. And then our phone number is 515-776-4552. That is our general line. So if you do have any questions, feel free to contact us. VISTA 101 is an understanding of VISTA online tutorial. It's an on-demand pre-recorded tutorial that VISTA has done. It's really understanding what VISTA is and what VISTA members do and can do. And so if you haven't, I encourage you to check out that webinar just to make sure you have an understanding of the program itself. In addition, the AmeriCorps website, nationalservice.gov, is our agency's website, and our programs, the AmeriCorps VISTA is one of our programs, and that link that is provided there is actually to partnering with VISTA, so to sponsor a VISTA project. And so there's some great resources and tips and tools and things to think about, and just more information about the VISTA program itself. So again, nationalservice.gov, if you go to that and even just search for the VISTA program, you'll be able to walk around that site a little bit and see what's out there. So vistacampus.gov is a fantastic resource. The 101 is on Vista Campus, but Vista Campus is kind of our online learning classroom for our current VISTA members and VISTA sponsors. However, it is a public site, so feel free to walk around that as well if you would like to. If you guys do have any questions, please let me know. We will be happy to address those. But before I end the recording today, any final questions from everyone who joined? Again, the phone lines are open. All right, I want to thank everyone for joining today. This concludes the Iowa VISTA Request for Concept Paper Technical Assistance webinar for 2018. I thank you all for your time today. If you do have any questions, as I've said, please let the Iowa State Office know. And I will stop the